Oh, hello. I was just reading a tiny book. Not really. Uh, we talk about this every time. We got to do a countdown or something. Because when we start, it's just us. It's just us here. Um, uh, um, um. So, welcome to Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. Pretty sure it's 2024. And our Patreon salon, our time capsule of discussions of all things Art Nouveau, from Art Nouveau to artificial intelligence. Um, I don't, once again, really have a plan for what we're going to talk about tonight. So, um, if anyone has questions about any of the projects that we're working on or any of the things that are taking place, then definitely do so in the comments and we'll go from there. Um, so we're getting ready to launch the third and final book in the Jugendstil 1896 series. Um, Something that's been really interesting to me recently is thinking about how, and really with that country in particular, with Germany, with their take on Art Nouveau, how relevant it is to a lot of the things happening today with technology and art. Because the things that they were rallying around in Germany in particular, and Art Nouveau, it kind of became a little bit of an ivory tower lifestyle. Italy never really embraced it. Uh, in England, it was kind of more of a craft oriented, a craftsmanship oriented movement. But the thing that's interesting, and I don't think I even realized this before getting this deep into the Jugend magazine, is they did that thing that great rock bands do. They made it a movement. They basically said, if you feel this, if you feel this, if you feel this, you are the youth that we are speaking to. Youth is not an age, youth is a mindset. And so by banging that drum, Jugend, Jugend, youth, youth, Jugend, Jugend, this idea that the entire art movement became affiliated with this new curvilinear style is what created uh, a big cultural identity around Art Nouveau, Jugendstil. Um, and so it's just interesting when I look at some of the rebellion against technology and things like that that are happening now, that uh, it really does feel like Germany resonates the most deeply with that modern sense of feeling a little bit lost uh, and looking for a grounding element, you know. And so it's kind of like when people have on their Facebook avatars no AI or AI with the red line. Um, you know, people were feeling lost in a really similar way in 1895, 1896. And you had, I mean, La Art Nouveau being opened just a year earlier before it was really the seeds were sprouting in Germany. Um, and so it was a new and exciting art movement. Looks very quaint to us today, but a really new and exciting art movement that completely connected with the idea that you don't need to be afraid of technology, but you have to find ways to embrace it and connect it to the humanity that you want to express. So, like with Jugend magazine, they used the highest, I was going to say most recent developments, but it was really the highest technical capabilities of technology to make those color covers. It didn't exist. Newspapers prior to that had black and white pages, covers, everything. So the idea that there was color lithography leaping at you from the nightstand is using um, the height of technology to bang the drum that we as humans need to be connected to history, to nature, to each other, to our culture, all of that. So for me personally, that resonates a lot in that the artists in Germany in 1896 didn't say, well, we should only print on, a Gutenberg letterpress to go back 400 years. They said, well, what's the new technology? How do we use it to push our message? And it worked. That's why we're talking about it 125 years later. Um, Kat asked me to explain, how does Art Nouveau correlate with rock and roll in the 60s? Do you mean aesthetically, or do you mean the mindset? I would say that aesthetically, uh, there was an exhibition in Berkeley in the 1965, I think, uh, and it was German Art Nouveau posters. The exhibition was called Jugendstil. And so the artists that were there were seeing these mind blowing posters with incredible fonts and all this hand drawn fonts interweaving with nature and people. And as the hippie aesthetic started to um, congeal, that uh, inclusion into the petri dish of San Francisco completely changed the color of everything that was growing in there, and it became these psychedelic colors, and it became that kind of interwoven sense of font and space and humanity binding to nature. So the visuals of rock and roll, I mean, think about the difference between um, the Dave Clark Five and uh, the gosh, oh my God, surrealistic pillow. Who is it? Jefferson Airplane. That's terrible. Uh, and even things like if you look at Revolver, Klaus Vormann was a German artist. He was very intimate with all of this lineage of German art. So, yeah, so German art had a lot more to do with rock and roll, I think, than any other country. I mean, maybe, of course, American culture, but I think if you're really looking at the aesthetics of the things that are a little more, like if you look at the Yes album covers, that's Roger Dean. Dean is coming out of Art Nouveau, but his palette is straight out of German Jugendstil. Um, and Kat's got another question here for me. There's a bunch of marketing this month around mental health awareness. What are some ways that books and art have empowered me to connectedness and an improved sense of well-being? I mean, that's I'm gonna laugh at the question and say always, every way, all the time. Um, I've never met someone who I'm rereading The Alchemist, and there's a parable in there about you can't really know a man until you've studied his home. And I've never met someone who didn't have a relationship with literature and history and storytelling and art and visuals. I've never met a human that had those things, that didn't also have a greater sense of self beyond their skin. Uh, my my son the other day was talking about someone in his class who's got main character syndrome, and I was thinking about how the thing that books and art do for me is they help me understand that I don't need to have walked in someone else's shoes to empathize with them. Um, and what literature does is it gives us an opportunity to experience things from another point of view that we can then return to our flesh, and from that have a bridge built to another place, and another bridge built to another place that allows us to be more sensitive to the ways that we are interwoven with each other, and through that have a more accurate sense of society. And the way that relates to mental health is that I think it's important to be able to go deep into your heart. And I think it's important to be able to go as far out. And I feel like the head is the computer, and we can get way caught up in there, especially with our own, if you're reading Timothy Leary or the Tibetan Book of the Dead or any of those things, we can get caught up in our own tapes. Robert Anton Wilson talks about this a lot. And so for me, the mental health comes from having a greater empathy for people around me that may see things differently than I do, and recognizing that that's their path and that's their adventure and that's their story, and that I don't need to control that, or be tempted to demean my path because of that disagreement. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're dealing with someone whose prime directive is clearly financial, and I know that mine is relationship driven. And for me, it's like there's quality, integrity, and financial is very low on the list. And I know that a lot of people that are involved with art on the business side, that's inverted. The financial decision comes first, and quality, integrity are always jockeying for second and third place. But that's not my course, that's not my life. And so some of the stresses that you might feel in dealing with that, I think that's kind of the root of mental health. It's dis-ease, it's discomfort. Well, where do you find your ease and you find your comfort? Well, for me, I find it in making great art and having really great relationships with creative people, especially, but also just knowing that I'm really showing up emotionally for the people that have shown up for me. And so I know this is way off topic, but I feel like the root of that for me, especially growing up, was always books and art. Those were, there's a Grant Morrison idea of a fiction suit, that you can kind of enter a book's universe and wear characters, and you can, and I think that's just a great way of looking at, we have access to all the knowledge that's ever existed. And as long as you're not reading articles written by ChatGPT, if you're reading a book about someone that was wandering through, one of my favorite books, Vagabonding Through Germany, was written after the First World War, and I love it. It's all these eyewitness accounts and talking about humans and people. Comic books. I love reading 50s and 60s Superman, and he's just so altruistic and optimistic. Like, all of those things for me are core tenets of mental health for me. I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't know if there's anyone in here, so it's just you and me, Kat. How does Century Guild's mission help promote empathy and encourage art and art books empowering well-being? Well, when a few houses ago, I lived in an area in Chicago that there were a bunch of gangbangers that would hang out on the corner. One of the guys had a little kid. This kid was out very sweet, and I always said hi to him, was always happy to see him. I always felt bad that like this kid's hanging out with these guys that are doing illegal shit and thinking like, what's his life going to be? And I thought, giving him art books isn't going to help. But what I used to do uh, is I would give him like Batman Adventures comic books. And my thinking was coming back to something I said earlier. I've never met anybody that didn't read a lot, that didn't have a wider view of the world. And I thought, if nothing else, just kind of putting that in his ecosystem, the idea that crime might not be the right life choice, not trying to control his world, but at least just dropping something in there that offers a different perspective. And so when it comes to the books that we publish, so many of these things are, um, they're not they're not perspectives that are the common art school perspectives, and certainly not things that you're going to encounter in popular culture. And when I learn about the ways the countries interacted before the wars, the way that the art changed because of the politics, um, it's incredibly illuminating. It's made me very sensitive to people that are under different economic hardships, um, and really recognizing that a good example is that things were going really well in Paris in the 1890s. You had the Industrial Revolution, the economy was good, and you had metaphysical ideas that would have been unimaginable to be discussed 50 years earlier. So the idea that there was a deity that was androgynous and all of these very, very late 20th century ideas about religion and spirituality and metaphysics, like that was a common thing for the cognoscenti in Paris to be discussing. And so to me, like the Le Pater book is really interesting because it explores that. It's very, very sexy. It's very rock and roll. It's very weird and out there and just fantastic. I mean, it's just literally, it's like fantasy converging with reality in these discussions about, we had telescopes and microscopes in our homes for the first time. So we were discussing the nature of existence in a completely different way. The idea that you could look at bacteria and look at stars, that was common at that point. Like it was a normal thing for people to have that. Again, not 50 years earlier. And so people turned inward in a different way. And so I think that Century Guild publishing a book like Le Pater, me taking the years to write it, pulls these messages into this era where the signal to noise ratio is just absurd. There's just so much noise and not a lot of well thought out messaging. And so the idea of taking the best of these ideas, kind of filtering it through this contemporary lens, I think is a great way for people that want to understand an aspect of society that they're not going to read about in their normal classroom studies, that's super valuable, both on a cultural level and on a really personal level. And then you step forward a little bit, and then you get into after the turn of the century, when people started making peace with technology, and you start to move into that velocity. Well, then you hit the Great War, you hit World War I. Well, then that decimates the planet in a way that we hadn't experienced before. And then you've got the pandemic that happened at the same time, and you've got Clinton Sheila dying, and you've got, Alphonse Mucha being killed after being in a Nazi not concentration camp, but, jail. And the way that this idyllic world changed in 25 years. the whole thing changed. Whole thing changed. And so you go from Art Nouveau to Expressionism in that window. Well, how did that happen? How did that happen in 20 years? From like, if Expressionism is peaking around 1920 and Art Nouveau is peaking around 1900. Well, I think when you start to study that, you start to learn about things that you don't read in the history books. You start to learn about the way people were feeding their families. You start to learn about not names and dates in a political sense, but the way humans as a society were reacting to the results of these political events, be they war, be they the Weimar Republic, be they, you know, um, different movements happening. I don't want to get too far off on that, but um, so to me, what the books do is they just, at the very least, you're seeing some beautiful images and you're learning about artists that you never might have heard of before, and certainly a ton that you certainly haven't. And then the other part is just that all the little clues are in there of things that are society oriented, that maybe one of those lines would inspire someone. Like if someone reads a line and they said something like, wow, I really thought this thing was interesting. Uh, Mention it in one of the posts or something, and I can recommend other books. There's so many great books. There's so many. And what I try to do is, unfortunately, like if someone said, oh, I love the fact that Muka used to have seances in his studio. Is there a book about that? I mean, unfortunately, there is, and it's a few $1,000s, and it's in French. So it's like, um, sometimes there's not ready information, but a lot of times things are posted in different archives and things like that. So yeah, so if there's ever anything you read in a book that is kind of a thread that you want to pull at, um, you know, I can recommend books, and also there are tons and tons of incredible articles on the internet, tons and tons. And I really have found, like, I'm very interested in the Weimar Republic because to me it's some of the best art that was ever made, but it was also made in the most distressing of eras. And so I like learning about it because it's just such a unique juxtaposition of misery and hunger with like a desperate opulence. You've got people drinking champagne, you know, half naked in these nightclubs, while other people are the next morning taking a wheelbarrow of money just to get a loaf of bread for their family. And it was a bizarre juxtaposition. And it wasn't, not to get too much on a tangent, but it wasn't like rich people and poor people. Everybody was poor. So what it was is it was people that were operating in a black market mindset. And so sex workers and people that were dealing in drugs and things like that were finding themselves in this ecosystem that could display this hedonism. But if you were someone, like watch the movie Cabaret, if you were someone wealthy, it's, you were in the same boat as everybody else because money wasn't worth anything. There's a picture, I think we put it in Flowering Lines, of kids making a big building out of stacks of money because the stacks of money were worth less than the price of a child's toy for a block. That money, the big stack of money, couldn't buy you a block. So it's like kids just played with money. So yeah, so very strange. I love it. Where are you seeing these comments? Cat just said Forrest. Hi, Forrest. Oh, chat's not working. That the Spanish flu ripped through the population as well. Yeah, I mean, not just, oh my God. I mean, Forrest, you're saying disillusion, and I agree with that 100%. But imagine being disillusioned, um, and then because of the war and the economy, like we just went through a pandemic. Like, imagine if everybody's houses had been bombed 6 months earlier. Imagine if there was no money for food and then that hit. Like, it really was just, yeah, it was decimating. And then the thing that really got Germany was the war reparations. It just bankrupted the country. And it was, again, lots of books on it. Super fascinating. I love it. I love that era. And it's very sad. We talk about empathy, we talk about education. It's very sad to me in two places, in politics and art, to be feeling like we haven't learned anything. The lessons that we're talking about in these books, and not just mine, but everything that are on these eras, the Belle Epoque through the Weimar Republic. Um, Empathy always makes a difference. Quality and integrity always make a difference. Always. Always, always. History proves this. And we see ourselves in a culture of entertainment where quality and integrity are secondary. Um, and this is why when I keep saying AI, the whole stress about AI is our fault, because we all fucking use Amazon. We all buy from Amazon. So we've made the ease of the transaction the priority. I have to buy a lot from Amazon at this point because I don't have an alternative for a lot of things. Um, it's I'm kind of a little in the middle of nowhere, but also too, like, everything got decimated. Like, I shopped at mom and pop stores until, I can't tell you how many I closed, like, in terms of just being, you know, something I would do. Every city I would land in, I would go and not that I'm rich, but I would do this. I'd spend at least $200 at a comic book store. Always did it just because I'm like, I want the next generation to have these places. Well, I'm not enough to do it as one person. Um, and so, we've lost record stores, we've lost bookstores, you know, I do a thing now. I've been buying directly from companies' websites. So, like, if I see something on Amazon or I see something online, my personal way to try to combat this is I'm buying directly from the company on the website. So they're getting a higher percentage of the money. And then perhaps on some level, I'm building a relationship with them. But yeah, there's no store within a half an hour of me where I could go buy a guitar cable. There just isn't. Um, and You get into the thing now. Like, Bill Sienkiewicz posted a thing the other day where a painting that he did is on Amazon. And there's so much weird cheap shit on there and bootlegs and all that. And like, I miss curatorial sensibility. And so when we talk about, like, where's the transition between being educated and being optimistic and then meaningful action, I think that, and I don't know how to say this that's in a way that's politically correct. I'll say it, maybe you guys will help me figure it out. I just keep thinking about that great quote from John Waters. It says, if you go home with someone and they don't have books, don't fuck them. And I loved that he said that. It crystallizes him, but I love the idea that it was like we had this run that I remember that I grew up in where it was really cool to be into books. It was really cool to be into music. It was really cool to be smart. It was really cool to care about learning meaningfully about a situation. And we're in a position now where uh, everybody has an opinion. And if an expert says, well, this is what I think, we've seen so many movies that are conspiratorial in nature that we just throw everything out. We throw everything out. And things like I remember during the pandemic when people are like, oh, well, he made a mistake or this doctor made a mistake. It's like, yeah, but that's how the process works. It doesn't mean that there's an agenda. And I'm not saying there aren't agendas sometimes, but you still, at the end of the day, it's like you got to listen to your doctor. If you're trying to like wire your house, like you hire an electrician. We don't apply that to politics or culture or anything like that. I'm dealing with all of this stuff with the marketing for Caligula, and it's like the guy that's been really fantastic for me to deal with was Stanley Kubrick's PR agent, and his name is Mike Kaplan, and I adore this man. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and just thinks like a supercomputer. And then I watch him talking to someone who's maybe 30 that's also in marketing, and they just kind of like, yeah, I don't agree with you. And it's like, yeah, well, like Stanley Kubrick was one of the greatest living directors in history. Maybe his marketing guy knows some things. Like maybe we should learn this and try to carry it forward. But it's like, I don't know, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. So it's really, I don't know if I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that what I'm seeing a lot of is that there's a very big dumbing down that's occurring. Uh, and I imagine it's always been that way, but I think about when I was working for Clive Barker, I saw someone had, I think, online the notes for his books of blood. And the editorial comments were spectacular. Whoever these editors were cared deeply. It was not a profession, it was a vocation, it was a passion. Then I looked at the notes that he was getting for like the books 30 years later, 40 years later. They were not the same level of notes. This is somebody that was doing it quick and then went home at 5 o'clock. And so, the thing that I would love to see happen with the stuff that I'm working on, kind of really the secret ulterior motive of Century Guild as a mission statement with the books, now with trying to make this metaphysical version of Caligula with the other movies and records and stuff that I'm working on and, with my community. Uh, I think it's the idea of I want it to be cool again for people to want to know things. I want it to be cool to not go to a concert with 50,000 people and jump up and down with your drink. I want people um, to really care about what's happening to other people. And to me, that's what music and art always was. I'm not going to lie, I went to see Def Leppard at a huge amphitheater. But, if you go to see Nick Cave, it's like going to church, the church of rock and roll. Like it's where's the music and art that's about connectedness and about removing commerce from the equation? Because like our lineage and legacy is not money. It is integrity. It is quality. It is taste. And the thing that I'm seeing is that the commerce surrounding art has completely divested itself of any responsibility to taste or integrity. And Gustav Klimt had a really beautiful, he made that artwork Nuda Veritas. And his point was, it was a quote by Schiller, the philosopher, that said, "To make art for the many is bad. It is important for the artist to create art for the few, with the intention of elevating everyone else." And that could be taken in a very egotistical way, but the idea is purer than that. The idea is if you're someone that has spent the time to try to do the self-examination of saying, hey, this is maybe why I'm detached here, or this is why my relationships don't work out, or maybe this is why this kind of trauma keeps repeating, or whatever it is. If you're taking that kind of deep work, that spiritual work, that self work, um, and you're putting it into a song or a book or a poem or a painting, if people don't get it right away, the goal shouldn't be to keep dumbing it down until everybody gets it. And we all know that we see that all the time. That something happens and then another character says something to explain it for the people who didn't get it. Kat asked me to tell people that the chat works on YouTube. Normally we have chatting in the StreamYard and it's not working today for some reason. If anyone has a question or a comment, please put it somewhere. And Kat will, oh, she says now it is working. I don't know. I'm sorry. Oh, it's working in live chat on YouTube. So I guess you can comment on, um, put this in the chat. Wait, so comment on Patreon or no, or just use live chat on YouTube? YouTube. Okay, thanks, Officer Kittles, our police here. I did hear a rumor that Deshazia is here. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. And I know Forrest is here. I hope Sean is here. Um, but yeah, that was a long ramble. I didn't think I had any questions. Uh, it's funny, Forrest. I see this comment catches forward about that entertainment is what it's devolved into. That's the thing with this whole AI thing. When artists are freaking out about what AI is going to be, I'm not as freaked out because it's a closed ecosystem. If you listen to blues records for a week and you pick up a guitar to play a blues riff, that's what AI is doing. If you look at, you know, a certain kind of art for 2 weeks and you've got good Photoshop skills, you could probably hack something together. The thing that it can't do is the work. And Deshazia mentions that, yeah, we're heading toward a weird time as dark as the Weimar era. I hope we don't have starvation. I hope we don't have another pandemic. And I sure hope we don't have bombs going off. But I will say this because I think it's really interesting that you said that. That I feel our war is this AI issue scenario. So, to the chagrin of probably all of my artist friends, I'm excited about it. And I'm excited for two reasons. One, because much like the artists in Jugend, you can use parts of this technology as an amplifier. The other part of it is that I think it's a harsh challenge against the lethargy that we've experienced. Everybody was so down on Lars Ulrich when he was coming out against, the streaming services back then. But look at what Spotify is now. Nobody makes money from that. We did this. We wanted everything to be so easy. We don't value art. And we as artists co-opted that, or co-signed that, I should say. We co-signed that by buying everything on Amazon, and so that comes back to that quote about if you go home with someone, then they don't have books, don't fucking. I feel like it has to be cool to go to someone's house, coming back to that parable from The Alchemist. If they don't have a painting on their wall, something's wrong. The painting can be by their nephew, but they should have something. What is something that is a tactile, tangible expression of a feeling that you want to look at because it connects you to something? There has to be something. Um, what kind of music are you listening to? Oh, well, if you're talking to someone, they're like, oh, I just kind of like everything. It's like, what does that mean? And if you find out that they really don't listen to anything, then it's a warning sign. Don't fuck that person. That's not that's not the we're trying to go the opposite direction of idiocracy. Imagine what this world would be like if our world leaders had to have a solid understanding of poetry. Just that, something just so simple. Uh, there's a great quote that I read the other day that said something: the strength of a warrior is not judged by how many lives he takes, it's by how many lives he saves. I fucking love that. My kid is so into war games, I want to write that out and put it up somewhere just to help permeate that idea. But imagine like the fairy tales of warrior kings that were also trained in the arts and had that kind of well-roundedness. Now it's all, conglomerates and money and politics are based on money conglomerates, and so this is where we are, and this is why AI is a problem. Um, Someone had posted a photograph that they took of a band, and I was like, oh, I'll listen to the band and see how they were. The song could have been written by AI. It didn't cut deep. It wasn't, the rhymes were things I was writing when I was 14. It was so if you're an artist coming back to this Weimar era, they invented expressionism. Invented it because there was no artistic language that could. So what happened? I never liked expressionism. And then I watched this documentary, and it was on this history of art, and it showed all of these beautiful drawings, beautiful paintings, and guys in the trenches trying to draw landscapes. Then their bodies started getting blown up. And as body parts are flying, that quaint little line that you learned in art class doesn't cover it. And so the Chandra's like, you've sworn more today than in the last 10 years. Because now this isn't streaming publicly, so I can talk normally. uh, uh, Tom Jane once, I'm just sharing it because it's funny because he's such a cool guy. I talked to him once and it was like late or whatever, and it was about art stuff. It was before I knew him, and he was saying fuck a lot. And he's like, sorry, but I fucking swear a lot after 5 o'clock. Anyway, so it just makes, and I was like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. But he thought, oh, the guy in the suit selling the nice art, I'm probably offending this guy. But yes, Kat says tonight's special guest is Frank Rizzo. Anyway, but so the point is that expressionism needed to fill a gap because the art wasn't covering it. So what are we going to do? Creatively, what are we going to do in this void? Everything's vapid. Everything's vapid. Just like Forrest said, it's all regurgitation. There's a whole thing you could look up about second screens. Like, if a television show requires too much concentration, they won't run it. They need things that can be a second screen because people want to be on their phone while they're watching TV. There's all kinds of industry stuff about it. You can Google it. But that's where we are as a culture. And then I think, Caligula, I put together this 3-hour movie that you probably need to watch at least twice, if not 3 times, to catch everything. And at the very least, need to have a basic understanding of the hero's journey or hermeticism to really understand what's happening to the character. It certainly benefits from having a lot of understanding of the theories around the temporary nature of reality. So Caligula is not a second screen movie anymore. It used to be a weird thing you might put on in the background at a party, and And so same thing, like I'm trying to toe that line. Le Pater is meant to be a fun flip through, but if you really read it, there's a lot there. Um, and so that's what I feel like this whole thing with AI, with all of that. I'm excited. I feel like I'm just now coming public as a creative person after decades of being a gallerist. And I'm coming into this world, and everybody is like freaking out about this AI stuff. And I feel a little like, bring it on. This is what I'm here for. Like, I saw a really great quote that said, this is what Joe Strummer trained you for. It's like, yeah, like, where's the rock and roll energy? What's the, you know, it's like, don't, if your lyrics are so bad that the lyrics from ChatGPT put you out of work, you weren't a great lyricist, like you were saying things that had been said before because all those ecosystems can do is reconstitute. And I was thinking about this today, um, a lot of tangents tonight, because I was listening to the Pretenders and I was thinking, God, Chrissy Hind does so many predictable things in music, but it's played with such an intangible heart that it keeps it really interesting for me. And the best thing of all is I never can predict what she's going to say. Never. And I love that. I love it. I love it because she may use cliches in shorter sequences, but lines like if I split like light refracted, like you're never going to hear that from ChatGPT. It's too out there. It's too clever. And then I've been listening an album that I really like, and it's called Viva El Amor. Um, it's just great. It's just deep. It's a great record, and it's later. And the reason I've been listening to it is it doesn't have a lot of the hits that people know, but I was thinking about her in that Chat GPT sense, in the sense of maybe someday the music can get there, um, but lyrically they won't. Like she's a poet. She's a poet, and it's not like I'm the biggest Pretenders fan, but yeah, she to me, I was just thinking in that moment, I was like, this is why artists are going to be okay. And if you're not striving to be as good a writer as a Chrissy Hind or you know, uh, I've been listening a lot also, and I think I talked about this last month. From a songwriting point of view, I've been listening to a lot of early Bruce Springsteen. And it's like, there's a lot of great American poetry there and a lot of juxtapositions. He's a weird, depressive artist type that put on a jean jacket. And so there's a convergence there that's extremely unique and very, very hard to get to. Um, And again, ChatGPT can't do that. It can't do it because it's new ways of looking at things. And expressionism, coming back to Shazia and the Weimar Republic thing, didn't exist before. So what's the thing that we can be doing now? What's the ways that we can be communicating? And I'm not saying that it needs to be an entirely new form of music, but maybe much like art in 1918, 1919, maybe it's time for the people painting classical paintings of nude women and, cows and barns, or palaces or whatever, like whatever was selling really well right before the war. Maybe it's okay to let that go in favor of something that is a deeper reflection of what our real inner condition is, and the discussions that we're having with ourselves and other people. Um, I think that's why we're here as human beings, and that's what I think is important. There's a bunch of comments here, so I'm going to look. That Cat is forwarding because I can't see them. Chrissy Hine is a punk icon. She is really cool. Okay, Kat's got another alchemist thing. Let me read the rest of these real quick. Yeah, Forrest, the thing about that snappy thing is really, if anybody hasn't watched the talks that Tristan Harris gives about the race to the brainstem, he's in the social dilemma. It's worth watching the social dilemma. And then beyond that, I think it's the Center for Humane Technology. I can't recommend anything more highly than what he's talking about. He's like a, if Douglas Rushkoff is Sinead O'Connor, then Tristan Harris is like Sarah McLachlan. And what I mean by that is that Douglas Rushkoff really paved a lot of the territory, but in some ways maybe it's a little harder to get into because there's so much of it. And he's talking now kind of the way I am, where he's got a lot of tangents because he's covered so much ground. But Douglas Rushkoff is brilliant, and you should read him. But the thing that Tristan does is he gives really succinct messages that are the key elements that take it out of the field of the expert and into away from the field of the expert and from anecdotes into really specific. This is what the technology is. This is what it does to you. This is how it's affecting us culturally. Um, and if you haven't watched the documentary about Cambridge Analytica, that's a really important one as well. But you have to watch The Social Dilemma. And I would recommend, just so you know what's going on, watch the Center for Humane Technologies talk. It's probably 6 months old at this point, on AI. When you see what they were able to do 6 months ago, we used a lot of AI things with the Caligula restoration, and it was changing faster than we could follow. So if this is what was happening 6 months ago, I can't imagine where it is now. But they can put monitors on you, and you can visualize something and they can see it on a screen. Like, this technology already exists. So you could be sleeping and dreaming and someone could be watching it on a monitor. This technology already exists. This is not science fiction. Watch that video. It's really worth it, and it's not short form. It's not 10 seconds, and it's the people who built all these tools that we're using telling us what's happening. Um, and yeah, buying direct from artists is great for us. I'm even doing it with products. I bought a bunch of guitar cables the other day, and I bought them from the the company. I do tend to I don't I do try to buying art from artists is a whole other conversation, but I do think it is important to do it. Um, Especially the comic art world's gotten really weird. That's again much longer conversation, but yes. Uh, I'm particularly fond of the artists who don't know that they're good. Because there are a lot of artists that are selling their art and they want very high prices for it based on kind of what they perceive their high market might be. Um, and there's um, there are a few artists, like I'll mention one in particular. I think her Instagram thing is Orphic Imaginarium. She's amazing. She's amazing. She's moving, but when after she moves, like I really want to find things to work on with her. Um, I think she's brilliant. I think she's great, and I think if she's selling art, it's a tenth of what someone else would charge, and the real value is somewhere in the middle. I've had artists where I was, they're talking about needing support or something, and I go maybe to buy something, and the price is just really, really high. So that's the reason I said it's a longer story. Is it's very complicated. Like, I want artists to value their work. In the best case scenario, artists don't have to sell their work. There's kind of other ways they can figure out uh, how to help revenue streams. But that's a long thing, and we've got 5 minutes left. Deshazia, you say it's crazy to think that musicians make more money from merch than the actual music they produce. Um, I was, it's funny. I read a book recently, and someone was talking about someone and complaining about them name dropping. And I thought, like, I like telling people who I had an experience with because I just think it's interesting. Whenever someone says to me, "Oh, and I talked to a friend and they said this," I'm always like, "Yeah, but who's that friend?" Like, I think it's the art historian in me. I don't know. So I'm going to tell you a story uh, that was on the tour bus for the Darkness. Uh, it was after the concert, and the manager told the band something about, it was X dollars ahead, meaning like the number of people that came in, this is what they spent average on merchandise. And whatever the number was, I didn't understand it. And I turned to Just and I was like, what is that? And he said, oh, and then he explained quickly. And he's like, yeah, it's very different now. He's like, we're in a time now where you have to care about such things. And I thought, well, yeah, I mean, I'd heard people say it that yes, bands make money on merch and all of that. And I was glad the opening band had a $40 t-shirt, but I bought it because I'd heard the stories that that's how bands get from town to town. Did I need a $40 t-shirt? No, but you know. So it's just interesting to think about this band that's played massive stadiums and they're wondering how many t-shirts sold that night. And it's absolutely nothing negative about them or uh, the situation or audience or anything. Just sharing an agreement with you that yes, it is something that they have to consider now in terms of making it profitable to tour and to go back into the studio to keep making music and doing the things that we want them to be doing, the things that culturally, I don't mean we want to like in our demand, but culturally, you want a great guitar player to be playing guitar. You want a great drummer to be playing drums. You want a great writer to be writing. Like our culture needs that. It needs that. And anyone hearing this is already in that zone. So the question is, well, how do we make wider waves culturally? And I don't have the answer completely to that. What I'm trying to do is just I'm trying to figure out how to make it cool to be educated. And again, it starts with Muka, it runs into Caligula, or yeah, it starts with Le Pater, runs into Caligula, and hopefully the more we just keep spreading word about what we're doing, that like my secret dream is that there's going to be some high school kid that's going to get Le Pater or Beautiful Macabre, and instead of like growing up with like mall level goth taste, they're going to be like, oh my God, this art from the turn of the century is incredible, and start looking into history. And that's how it happens. It's how it happened for everyone here, I'm sure. Um, 1 minute left. I will answer the thing Kat asked me to say. There's a thing in The Alchemist. There's a parable uh, that comes into the story, uh, and actually, no, it's not the parable. I'm telling this wrong. I'll start over. In The Alchemist, the character winds up getting robbed. And all he's left with are these two stones that are kind of like one black, one white for yes or no. And were gifted to him, but he has no food. He's in a country where he doesn't speak the language. He's on a quest. Um, and then he gets robbed, and all he has are literally two stones in a bag with a hole in the bottom. And there's a transformation that occurs, speaking of alchemy, there's a transformation that occurs where he decides to not look at himself as a victim, but as an adventurer. And certainly, an adventurer on great travels encounters challenges. And if you were reading your story in a book and you were hitting challenges, you would just be like, this is the meat of it. This is the juice. This is the frosting. This is what makes that endpoint worth it. And if you're reading a story and the adventurer climbs into an air-conditioned car, drives for 10 minutes, walks in, and then there's a vault of gold, that's not a very interesting story. And so I can say I'm dealing with a lot of challenging humans right now. I'm dealing with a lot of elements in my life that I disagree with. It's the things we talked about tonight. I disagree morally with putting finance above integrity and artistic integrity and things like that. But then I think about it when you hear about like Bob Dylan getting dropped from a record label and, you know, people being furious when he came out with an electric guitar and all of that. All these stories are part of the journey. And so the question is, are you a victim or are you an adventurer? Are you on an adventure? And if you are on an adventure, then you have to look at this as part of the story. And you can't have a foot in both. If you feel in any way that you're still a victim, you haven't committed to the adventure. And when people might say with things like this, well, sometimes it's some of both. It's like, it can't be. If you're a victim, you're not embracing the adventure. There's always something that you could do differently. There's something you could have done differently, and there's something you could do differently now, moving forward to move the needle in the way you want it to be moved. And if that's extricating yourself from a situation, if that's putting yourself into a situation, if it's calling someone that you haven't talked to in far too long to reconnect with them, if it's taking the time to write down some ideas that you've been putting off writing down, if it's reading a book, if it's making a painting, if it's just telling yourself, I'm going to take this weekend and I'm not going to pick up my phone, I'm going to hang out with someone in my family. You know, like the victim says, well, I have to work all the time, I have to do this, I have to do this. Well, then there's something in unraveling that. Where are you not making the money that you need to buy yourself that time? What are the tools that maybe people are doing that could help you with that so that you're viewing it as a challenge and an exciting adventure? For me, when I started thinking about money that way, it was great because then I realized I was always behind the eight ball financially because I was always choosing the romance. But when I realized, no, there's a way to like honor my time so that it, as a byproduct, creates a little bit of stability. Like, we're all hard workers. So if you're working hard and you're just making sure that you're compensated for most of what you're doing and you're not being a people pleaser, you can make time for the things that you should be doing for yourself spiritually. And then the dream, the ideal, the thing that I believe we should all be striving for is that no one should be working a job. Everyone should be pursuing a vocation. For me, archiving, storytelling, the metaphysical and spiritual studies, all of that for me is a vocation. If I had $200 billion in the bank tomorrow, I would be doing exactly what I'm doing. And the more that you can build stability around that, the more that you can be pickier with how you do it. But the biggest key to that, and this was the thing I just read in The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, that resonates with me, is like, anytime I'm frustrated or angry or upset or any of that, I recognize, well, why am I writing myself as the victim in this story, and then I just do my best. I'm not saying I do it well, and I have a great support system that reminds me. So we all need good support systems that reminds me, you're not a victim, you're an adventurer. And so yeah, another book that I can't recommend highly enough is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And we are 5 minutes over. Tom, before closing, I'm going to read what Kat wrote. Thank you for joining us, whether you are here with us during our live discussion or watching this recording after the salon. We will see you here again next month on June 6th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Yeah, at this point, everyone here kind of knows we started these because of missing the interactions in the gallery. And it's just a way for me to make myself available. So anyone that's here listening, if you hadn't been here before, you are always welcome to message in with questions or topics, or you're welcome to comment publicly on the Patreon stuff. And I'm very happy to talk about anything. It could be an exhibition that we did 15 years ago. It could be something that we did 15 weeks ago. I'm happy to talk about it. I just want to be, I want to show, I'm very grateful for the fact that we've built velocity with the publishing and the filmmaking, and now starting back again in the music. And so I want to just pay forward the things that were paid to me. So yeah, questions about anything art universe, even if it's theoretical, I'm always happy to talk about it here. So that being said, thank you everyone for being here. Look at all the cameras. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. No, next month. Next month, first Thursday.